Love. It's one of those things I don't think we'll ever truly understand. That feeling when your heart flutters upon their sight, or the anxiety that somehow blooms from the sterile ground of conversations you've had a million times before. Yet this singular feeling is so powerful, it can override the human instinct of self-preservation, inspire the most beautiful creations the world will ever witness, and contribute to more pain than anything else imaginable. It's because of its inherently incomprehensible nature that hundreds, thousands of years of philosophy, prose, poetry, and mythology has been written around this singular subject. The ancient Greeks understood this better than anybody, and their lasting impact on Western culture has ensured the same motifs reappeared over and over again. Love is an ever-present theme in the mythological narratives that formed the backbone of the Hellenistic civilizations, and its unsavory neighbors of lust, anger, and betrayal are shown to affect anyone from the lowest of farmers to the king of the heavens himself. After all, it's these emotions which make us human, or in the Greeks' case, like the gods themselves. There's the heartbreaking story of Hero and Leander, lovers who lived on opposite sides of the Hellespont or Dardanelles, yet met during the yearly festival to Aphrodite. Smitten by love but sworn to secrecy, they arranged a plan, one in which Hero would set a lamp in the window of her tower to guide the young Leander as he swam the straits each and every night. The plan worked flawlessly, until a cool autumn evening where the equinoctial gales blew the fire out, and with nothing to guide him, Leander drowned in the dark water. Or perhaps you've heard the tale of Cupid and Psyche, in which the god of love, known as Eros to the Greeks, fell for the aforementioned mortal princess, whisking her away to an enchanted castle in the sky filled with invisible servants who catered to her every need, yet was equally forbidden from seeing her mysterious lover, laying the foundation for the fairy tales that would later bloom across Christian Europe in the Middle Ages. Yet no myth is more prescient in my mind today and impactful in its message than a tragedy covering the ever-permanence of death, the lengths we go for love, and how grief inspires art, while setting the tone for creatives across the ages and an example of masculinity for our modern era. Orpheus was not just a master musician. He was the greatest of his time and the greatest that ever was. His mother was Calliope, the muse of epic poetry, and his skill with the lyre was even said to surpass those of his father Apollo, the god of music. Though, unlike mortals prior, Orpheus was never foolish enough to challenge him. With a strong tenor voice, I imagine clear as glass, sweet as honey, and warm as a hearth all at once, the young man wooed men and women alike, ensuring his place as a favorite amongst the gods and a hero of his age. Yet, with all his fame and fortune, he had eyes only for Eurydice, his one and only love, whom he cared for more than anything on the planet. The two were perfect for another, and planned a long, joyous life together. Yet so was the fate of Eurydice, that she was struck dead on her wedding day by a venomous snake in the grass. Just like that, in a few short moments, all the light in Orpheus's world was snuffed out. All the pain he ever felt was multiplied, and it seemed as if Helios would never again guide the sun across the sky. The world entered mourning, not only for the loss of the innocent-souled Eurydice, but the abandonment of the lyre by Orpheus, believing that nothing now on the planet was worth its sound. And so things remained, until one day when the great musician resolved to make a change. Surely the Lord of the Dead would understand. Surely he could use his talents to convince him, and surely he could bring his wife home. So Orpheus descended the depths of Hades. He charmed the three-headed dog Cerberus, paid his ferry across the Styx with a song, and soon enough was standing before the king and queen of the underworld. Hades rightfully demanded who Orpheus thought he was, marching into the realm of the dead on living feet, and declared that he does no favors for Olympians or their children, no matter their abilities. Yet his wife Persephone, always the softer of the two, was intrigued, and convinced her husband to allow one song to change his mind. And so Orpheus tuned his lyre, prepared his voice, and performed a song to Eros, a song to love. It was said the underworld had never heard such a sweet sound before, and never heard it again. Sisyphus stopped endlessly rolling his boulder up the hill, Ixion's wheel of fire stopped spinning, and even the Furies were said to have wept. Forever moved by the immense beauty of the music, Hades did something he had never done before and would never do again. He granted Orpheus his wish, but only under the condition he had faith in the god's word, and led his wife to the realm of the living while never looking back. He had to trust Eurydice was following, and was warned that even as much as a sideways glance would lose her forever. It seemed a simple enough task, yet as time passed on and Orpheus got no signs that anyone was following, doubt crept into his mind. And as the light of the sun shone down on the dead realm's entrance, that doubt turned to fear. What if he left her behind? What if she'd lost her way? What if Hades lied? Finally, he couldn't take it anymore, and with his first steps into the mortal world, turned back to look upon his love, and immediately regretted it. Eurydice was only a few steps away from life, yet as Orpheus reached out to grab her, his hands felt nothing but air, and in her eyes he saw only one emotion: forgiveness, because she knew deep down that the mistake was born only from love. The young man tried once more to cross the river Styx, begging Charon for hours that quickly turned to days, before eventually losing hope and heading home. It's said after this, Orpheus forsook women entirely, roaming the northern ice and fields never free of frost, singing of grief, loss, and hopelessness. Yet the goddess Aphrodite, enraged by such an eligible bachelor forsaking man's gift, brewed immense resentment in the women of Thrace, who, jealous of the love he gave to young men in the region, tore Orpheus apart, limb from limb. In the end, the two lovers were reunited in the realm of Hades, where they remain in peace to this day. The story itself, as I stated in the video's beginning, is a tragic one. It's tinged with the heartbreaking motifs that are spread across the entirety of the mythological narrative it's born from. Yet the nature of the tragedy was interpreted quite differently depending on who's telling it. In Virgil's Georgics, it's quite clearly meant to be a heartbreaking tale. However, in Plato's Symposium, the philosopher mocks Orpheus as cowardly, claiming that if he wished to join Eurydice, he could have done so by taking his own life. A view I find, frankly, quite harsh, but then again, I'm not from ancient Greece. To me, it seems abundantly clear that what makes this story a tragedy is the very fact it exists to begin with. And there's no better example of this sentiment than a comment I found online a few months ago, one that stuck with me ever since. Orpheus was always going to look back. Hades gave him an impossible task, one he knew even he could not complete. Whether he looked back because she tripped, or because he couldn't hear her, or because he thought she'd also gotten out, it doesn't matter. He loved her. He was going to look back. An Orpheus that doesn't look back is an Orpheus that never goes to the underworld in the first place. That's what makes it a tragedy. Let me state that last part again. An Orpheus that doesn't look back is an Orpheus that never goes to the underworld. Its impossibility is the whole point, because no man or woman, no matter how talented, can override the will of Thanatos, the will of death. And those who attempted, such as Sisyphus, were made an example for doing so. Yet in spite of this, it's still unequivocally a quintessential love story of the Greek world, and one that inspired countless works across the ages, such as the tale of Sir Orfeo, a musician king of Britain whose wife Eurydice is abducted by a fairy king and taken into paradise. Following a similar outline of the Greek tale, yet ending in the happily ever after format more common of its time. Or perhaps we could take a look at a more modern example, such as the 2019 song Talk by Irish singer-songwriter Hozier, in which he sings, "I'd be the voice that urged Orpheus when her body was found. I'd be the choiceless hope and grief that drove him underground. I'd be the dreadful need in the devotee that made him turn around. And I'd be the immediate forgiveness in Eurydice. Imagine being loved by me." In this example, the myth is being utilized as a tool in the narrative, one where an ill-intentioned narrator is using flowery language to seduce someone in an insincere manner. Yet it's funnily enough this example of manipulation by a toxic male figure that calls for a necessity to analyze the character of Orpheus and the masculinity it presents. As in every tale of this legendary character, he is always painted as a talented and well-intentioned individual, despite the lack of what many would see in the modern day as masculine traits. His skill and purpose was in the arts, not battle. In a separate tale of the legendary hero Jason and his Argonauts, Orpheus does not even participate in the rowing of their ship, instead using his musical abilities to inspire strength and discipline in his comrades. In a conversation with Alex O'Connor in July of this year, she and Quirk, known online as the cultural tutor, discussed lost arts of chivalry in the modern age, saying, "You know, when you read these romances, these knights were in some sense hypermasculine, because they walked around with swords, wearing armor, literally fighting to the death with other men and going to war. But at the same time, in the presence of women, and even in the presence of other men, they could be very tender, and they were supposed to be." Though Quirk is discussing the social behavior of medieval knights, I think it's relevant to this discussion, as what he's referencing is the cultural successor to the classical civilizations informed by narratives such as this. The virtues of Orpheus are ones of motivation and care for those closest to him, enough care that he would be willing to risk an eternity of torment to bring his beloved home. Virtues which grow ever more important in a world increasingly flooded with alpha male content and a peeling back of educational standards, most notably in the arts. And it's in the arts that our character almost singularly resides, and something which is utterly transformed by the loss he experiences, singing songs of lamentation and grief instead of love and joy. It was as if the loss of something personal inspired the creation of another, and that's exactly what occurred. In Eurydice's absence, Orpheus became a conduit for all the grief of humanity, and expresses it in one of the only manners that its neighboring emotion of love could ever be truly understood: in music. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.